It's a truism in politics that one campaigns in poetry but governs in prose. At least a former governor of New York State said that. Your view of Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric may have you doubting the timeless quality of his remark. So as we reach the 100th day of Mr. Trump's presidency, perhaps he ought to chew over another maxim, one put forward by a British Prime Minister, that events, dear boy, events are the things most likely to blow a government off course. And like so many occupants of the Oval Office before him, Mr. Trump's been buffeted by cold political winds from the Korean Peninsula. Tensions have risen in Northeast Asia amid concerns over new nuclear weapons tests conducted by North Korea. Washington, Beijing and Seoul believe that North Korea could very soon have nuclear weapons with intercontinental capability in terms of the delivery, meaning they could be used to target cities in the United States, particularly on the West Coast. North Korea says it'll, quote, never stop testing nuclear weapons so long as the US continues alleged, quote, acts of aggression. Well, US Vice President Mike Pence promised his country would meet any North Korean aggression with an overwhelming military response. In an unprecedented move, Donald Trump invited all 100 US senators to a White House briefing to discuss the situation. But the rhetoric from Washington appears to have been dialed down, with the US military commander in the Pacific theater saying they want to bring Kim Jong-un to his senses, not to his knees. We're joined now to discuss this by Sebastian Gorka. He's Deputy Assistant Strategist in the White House. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
Bring the Korean dictator to his senses, not to his knees. What would that mean in policy terms?
Well, one thing about this administration is we don't tend to give away our playbook in advance, but I think if you look at the events of the last 3 weeks, it's very clear that we've sent a message to several nations that have client states that they have to draw their own internal red lines for what kind of behavior they will countenance from those client states, whether it is Russia with Syria or whether it is China with North Korea. North Korea will not be solved in bilateral discussions. It's not a normal nation. So right now, I think the Mar-a-Lago summit with Xi Jinping, the results of that summit, especially the turnaround of the Korean coal shipment, tells you that things are going in the right direction.
What do you expect China to do?
North Korea relies upon China. It is isolated from the global economy, and China has a lot of leverage. So China can exercise that economic and political leverage.
But what's the game here? What do you want China to do?
The game's a very simple one. North Korea has to stop taking actions that are destabilizing to the region and stop behaving in a way that is in material breach of numerous international requirements with regards to weapons of mass destruction programs and ballistic missiles.
And what indications do you have that China is prepared to use its leverage in that direction?
I think the most obvious one is what happened with that coal shipment. But beyond that, we're not going to force our hand or Beijing's hand. So this is delicate stuff, very delicate stuff. Because remember, this is a nation that is more Stalinist than Joseph Stalin's USSR was. And as such, it's not your normal actor, let's put it like that.
The British Foreign Secretary said today that military options are, quote, not the way forward, and risk, quote, huge and hideous reprisals. What do you say to that?
I say what the president has demonstrated in the last 14 weeks is that statecraft is never a univalent function. You never solve problems by saying there's only one way of solving things. Diplomacy without the option for the use of force is just words and pieces of paper. A statecraft requires the application of all the tools of statecraft, all the instruments of power at the right time. That is why we sent a very clear message. It's not about leading from behind. It's not just about meetings in Geneva or Vienna. It's about the option, should it be required, to use other tools as well.
So what was that clear message?
That America is back and that there are red lines and we will execute on
What is the red line?
Well, in recent weeks, it's the use of prohibited weapons against innocent women and children.
But in North Korea, what's the red line?
Again, we don't give our playbook away.
But you said you'd made it very clear, but it's not.
We've made it clear at a political level, but we're not going to talk about the tactical or operational theater triggers. That's what the Obama administration did with Mosul. It's what the Clinton administration did with the Balkans. If you broadcast on Claire all of your potential triggers, well, then those will be used against you.
One Republican senator after the White House briefing said that it, quote, lacked even straight answers on what the policy is regarding North Korea and its testing of ICBMs.
I would disagree.
But you weren't there.
If he's making a discussion, a comment about an unclassified meeting, then I would disagree.
But what is the policy on ICBMs? If the North Koreans continue to test missiles, to give them an ICBM capability, and with that capability they're able to miniaturize the nuclear weapons so that they could nuclearize an ICBM. If they continue down that road, if Chinese pressure either doesn't happen or doesn't deter them, what's the American reaction?
Again, we do not show our cards to the players at the poker table, but the Vice President was very clear in his tour of Asia last week. The capacity to inflict physical damage on our allies or partners or our nation will not be countenanced. How we will get to that point, whether it will be through multilateral diplomacy behind the scenes, second track, third track negotiations, the use of force in some demonstrable fashion to send a message, these are all options on the table, but we will not declare what those options will be at a certain time.
Do you accept, though, that if there was a military response to undermine or destroy North Korea's ICBM capabilities, that the price would be a rain of fire on the South Korean capital?
Well, look, everybody knows that geography is destiny, and you know the distance between...
It's about 70 miles, I think, isn't
it? Exactly.
But and the North Koreans
the artillery
have
is there.
Massive artillery.
Massive, yeah.
To hit a modern, big population, westernized city.
Nevertheless, there are numerous other tools that can be used. I'm not going to comment, I'm not going to confirm or deny, but there have been stories about why that recent test failed. It didn't fail because a bomb was dropped on the missile launch pad. It failed for other reasons. So
US cyber warfare reasons.
Is one theory that I'm not going to comment on.
Well, you raised it.
No, but I'm not going to confirm or deny it.
When the US administration launched the cruise missiles on the Syrian airfield after the gas attacks, that you could see that in terms of a punishment act for what had been done by the Assad regime. But what's the strategy behind it?
What's the strategy? Very similar to what we're doing in North Korea. Assad's regime has significant sponsors. One of them is Russia. And we sent a message that you may want to reconsider just how far your sponsorship goes when you have a satrapy, when you have a client that is prepared to use chemical weapons against its own citizens. That is a strategic response. And as you saw with regards to Secretary Tillerson's cancelled meeting with Vladimir Putin and the volte-face that led to that meeting, the desired effects of that use of force were arrived at.
But what's been different about Russian actions in Syria since the attack?
It's not actions in Syria. It's clearly their reassessment of just how deep and how far that relationship will go, and their openness to talk to our cabinet members on these issues.
But I just don't know what's changed on the ground since that attack. I mean, within 24 hours, the Syrian Air Force was taking off from that very airfield and hitting civilian areas which were deemed to be rebels. So what changed? And by the way, why did 59 cruise missiles do so little damage?
What were those aircraft? You need to have a look at those. Those were pre-fueled. They didn't even have the capacity to fuel those aircraft. So it was smoke and mirrors. What has changed in almost every interview I give, I have to remind people, this is week 14, not month 14 of the administration. So, patience is also, a virtue.
What do you make of what you've heard, Saeed Al-Fasi?
Well, it goes back to the questions I was asking at the beginning. What is the strategy? And, you know, what we're kind of hearing is, well, there is a strategy. We're not going to tell anybody what that strategy is. We're not really going to deny or confirm what the strategy is. And I think as international partners, as somebody who sat in the, you know, Foreign Office for 2.5 years, if we're going to commit to supporting strategies, well, we need to know what is going on. And I think even in relation to Syria, it was obvious that we didn't know what was going on until it happened.
In World War II, what did we do with regards to the Third Reich? Did we advertise our strategies? In fact, we did the opposite. We convinced Hitler that we were coming over in Calais, not in fact coming over on the beaches of Normandy. That's strategic action.
Well, actually, that was a tactic. What we did in terms of strategy was leave nobody in any doubt that we were going for the total destruction of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, but
that was the strategy, and nobody was in any doubt.
How we were going to achieve
no, but we knew what the end game was.
That's an objective, not a strategy. Don't mix your
terms.
terms.
And the discussion between allies was very clear as to what the strategy was during the Second World War. I think, look, ultimately, there is no doubt in anybody's mind that, you know, Assad has committed the most vile murders and acts in his, in his own country.
He's still there.
But he's still there. And we've been saying since 2011, Assad must go. I'm not even sure what the US policy is now and whether Assad must or mustn't go. I mean, that hasn't even been clarified.
We don't have what the Obama administration had, which is an article of faith that he must go. We're going to deal with the people who support him because it has to be. Look, the bottom line is the killing has to stop. You asked about the difference between strategies and objectives. Our objective is the killing has to stop. What the permutation is for that, who's in power, that will be a political function, a political process.
All right, we'll leave it there, but it's good to talk to you, Sebastian
Thank
Gorka.
you.